Welcome back folks, for a very quick leak video about the ISU-130. Now normally I do long leak videos about upcoming tanks on the Super Test server, but the ISU-130 is very special because you will not be able to purchase this tank from the gift shop, nor it will be given out as a reward for Clan Wars, special missions, or Stronghold mode. So the only way of getting the ISU-130 is becoming a wargaming moderator or volunteer. So normal general public does not get this tank, but it's quite alright because the stats of this tank is not that good. Therefore, I do not want to spend that much time on the ISU-130 because not a lot of people will get it. But I still want to tell you the stats so you do not become jelly of this thing, since the stats are not that good. Now the ISU-130 is originally based off of the ISU-122S version of the tank destroyer, but normal ISUs were fitted with a 152mm derp gun, the howitzer, and it is used as an assault tank with infantry, so you can knock down bunkers or buildings or stuff like that. But Russians decided to fit a project with the 130mm gun onto this tank destroyer and use it to destroy tanks. Now this naval 130mm gun was insufficient when compared to the original 122mm guns that's on the stock ISU within the game. So you can see the stock 122mm guns, and the 130mm guns has less penetration than the 122mm. So this project was cancelled. But here's some pictures of the ISU-130. It still developed a few prototypes, but alright. And here are the in-game models for the ISU-130, which basically looks the same as the ISU-152 with a smaller gun, which is quite alright, but you have 90mm at the front, 75mm at the sides, and 60mm at the rear. I think the ISU-152 has 90mm at the sides, so it's less side armor, but alright. But yeah, the gun characteristics of this tank destroyer is kind of bad in my opinion, but we'll talk about that later. So here is the armor value of this tank. So it has 75mm on the superstructure, but 90mm on the hull, which is kind of weird. Whereas the ISU-152 has 90mm on the superstructure as well. So alright. Armor is kind of lacking, but you still get a very big matlet to throw a few shots. So you can actually bounce shots off the matlet since it's 100mm thick with 115mm behind it. So alright, you can bounce a few shots with the matlet, like the 152. But here is the in-game description of the ISU-130. So it is based off the ISU-122, and it carries the 130mm B-13 naval gun, but the gun was proven inaccurate in penetration in comparison to the 122mm. So this project was scrapped, and this is basically a prototype. So alright. And here are the in-game stats for the ISU-130. Now this is going to be a tier 8 tank destroyer for the Russians, but it will probably see up to tier 10 games, so that's gonna suck. It has 1000 hit points, 10 less than the 152, so quite alright. Max weight is 52.6 tons, so you can ram a few light tanks and mediums. View range is the same as the 152, so 370 meters, but you do need binoculars in order to help with the view range. So this is kind of low, but alright. Radio range is very bad in my opinion, 440 meters, in which you have to play this thing like an assault gun instead of a tank destroyer that hides in the back, so that's gotta suck. Armor is 90mm at the front, 75 for the superstructure at the sides, and 60 at the rear. Armor on the hull is 90mm at the front, 90 at the sides, 60 at the rear. So I don't know how the ISU-152's armor is going to lay out, but I think the 152 has 90mm on the side for the superstructure instead of 75, but alright. Engine power is kind of crap, 520 horsepower. Power to weight ratio is very bad, 11.10 horsepower per ton ratio. This is very bad. The ISU-152 has a way better engine, about 700 horsepower or so, or at least 700, but that thing can shift, so this is kind of bad. Top speed is only 34 kilometers per hour forward and 12 backwards, so this thing is pretty sluggish. Traverse speed is only 24 degrees per second, which is slow. Terrain resistance or terrain resistance is only 1.1 for hard terrain, 1.3 for medium terrain, 2.1 for soft terrain. So yeah, this thing sloshes around in swamps and is very not immobile. So ugh. Gun traverse is only 2 degrees to the left, 9.7 degrees to the right. So this is awkward because the gun doesn't point that well to the left, but points very good to the right. So it's like the AMX 13F3 artillery. I'll show you how the gun traverse work, but that means you cannot point this gun to the left of this vehicle most of the time. That's gotta suck. Gun elevation and depression is only 1.1 degrees of gun depression. This is historically accurate. So you can only point this gun 1 degrees below the normal parallel line to the ground. That is god awful. That's even worse than rear mounted tank destroyers like the Waffenträgers, Panzer IV or Waffenträger E100. You only have 1 degrees of gun depression. That is god awful. 14.23 gun elevation, which is it's mediocre. It's still bad. It's not 20 degrees, but oh my god, 1 degrees gun depression is really bad. The gun is a 130mm gun. It does a lot of damage, like the tier 10 IS-7's gun, so it does a lot of damage, 500 per shot. And gold rounds does even more damage, like the ISU-130's gun. So yeah, the gold ammo has less penetration, but it deals more damage, like the ISU-130. So alright. It has 250mm penetration for the normal AP, which is kinda bad for a tier 8 tank destroyer, but it's not that bad. It's okay. I mean, heavy tanks have more penetration, so yeah. Gold ammo is 187mm penetration. This is also likely to be AP as well, so that's gotta suck. But you deal more damage, so shoot at soft targets like medium tanks or something like that. But high explosive has only 65mm penetration, but deals a lot of damage. It's alright. Module damage is lower than the 152, obviously, but quite alright. Reload time is very slow, like the ISU-130Y, so this is a very slow reload time. Accuracy is 0.4, which is 0.01 better than the BL-10, but aim time is slow, but not as slow as 3.6 seconds. You carry only 25 rounds, so make sure those shots hit. But reload time mixed with accuracy mixed with ammo is kind of bad, but alright. So the DPM, if you actually hit and penetrate with all your shots, is, let's see, you reload about every 4 rounds per minute, about more than 4.1 round per minute. So if you deal about 500 damage per shot, you only have about 2000 DPM with this tank, so it's not that good. It's not that good, and you have to penetrate, which it is kind of hard for 215mm. But alright, so let's compare this thing with the ISU-152. And here is my favorite tank, or one of my favorite tanks in the game, the ISU-152. Now, armor-wise, it's the same armor. So it has, I didn't know it has 75mm on the superstructure. Alright, that's something new, but 75mm at the superstructure on the sides, as well as 90mm on the hull. So it's like the same hull armor. So hull armor is the same, superstructure armor is also the same. Gun mantlet is about the same, pretty much the same. 100mm of space armor alongside with 100mm behind it, or somewhere around it, but it will bounce a few shots somewhere, so you can still throw a few shots with a gun mantlet, like the normal ISU-152. Now the main difference between this tank and the ISU-130, or these two tanks, is that the engine power is kind of bad, and as well as the gun. So let's compare. So as we can see with the BL-10, we have way more penetration. way more penetration. And we deal a lot more damage. So alright. But this tank also has better DPM than the ISU-130 because it reloads pretty much a little bit faster, alright? So you can fit a gun rammer with vents as well as a good crew, and can get this reload time down to like about 11.5 seconds or something like that. But alright, so the DPM on this thing is about 2,400 or so, 2,400, 2,300, but you still have to penetrate with a low penetrating 215mm shot. So alright, but DPM wise, it's alright, I guess. Now this thing is a smaller caliber, so it does less module damage, obviously, than the BL-10. So, but you only carry 5 more rounds. Only 5 more? That sucks. I mean, if you carry 10 more rounds, that would be decent, I guess. So the accuracy is, I don't think it's 100% crew accuracy, but if it is 100% crew accuracy, it is less accurate than the BL-10. So I think this is only garage stats and not 100% crew, but it shouldn't be less accurate than the BL-10. If it is, it's gonna suck. It aims faster. It's supposed to be aimed faster than the BL-10, which I expect it to. Alright. Power is 700 horsepower on the 152 instead of the 520 horsepower on the 130, so that's gonna suck. So power to weight ratio on the 152 is actually better, so you can actually move with the 152. Whereas the 11.10 horsepower per ton ratio on the 130, this sucks. This sucks. And the top speed also sucks on the 130 because it's only 34 kilometers per hour. Whereas the 152 could drive up to 43 kilometers per hour. So this thing is kind of slow. Ugh. Hull traverse is, let's see, chassis traverse speed is 3 degrees faster. Alright. But terrain resistance is pretty much the same. It has better terrain resistance on soft terrains, but that's pretty much the same as the 152. So alright. But the main thing is that the 152 has very good gun traverse in comparison to this thing, because this thing can only turn 2 degrees to the left. And what that means is, if you're facing your tank, so imagine this is your 130, you can only point the gun 2 degrees to the left. So you can only point like that much to the left. That's it. That's how much you can point to the left. Let me put it downwards a little bit. So yeah, that's about how much you can point the gun to the left. 2 degrees. That is terrible. Whereas the 152 can actually point the gun a little bit more to the left. So you can actually turn it a little bit more. I think about 5 degrees or something like that, but 2 degrees is kind of bad. You can turn 9 degrees to the right though. So you actually could lob the gun all the way to the right with 10 degrees, like the Object 704. So the Object 704 I think has about 7 degrees to the right, or something like that. So you can actually turn the gun a little bit better. So the gun traverse on this thing, the 130, is like the AMX-13 F3, the artillery that I play, which is kind of awkward. So you have to get used to the gun traverse on the 130, like the artillery version of the AMX-13 light tank, whatever you call this thing. But yeah, it's like this thing. So you can only point the gun about a little bit to the left, but a lot to the right. So like the artillery version. That's kind of weird, but alright. Now gun depression on the 130 is also pretty bad. 1 degrees of gun depression. That is horrible. So if you imagine this is your 130. Oh boy. And this is the normal parallel line to the ground. That is 1 degrees. That is 1 degrees. That's oh god. You cannot point this gun down. 1 degrees is that much. Oh boy. 14 degrees upwards is about that much. About that much. So in comparison to the 152, it has way better gun elevation on the 152. 6 degrees of gun depression in comparison to 1 degrees. Ugh. And this is not historically accurate, but you cannot play with 1 degrees of gun depression. That's kind of bad. View range is the same. Better radio on the 152. Way better radio. So you have to actually play the 130 like an assault gun. But you will not get this tank normally. It's not for normal public. So yeah. So my final opinion about the ISU-130 is that this is not that good of a tank destroyer. First of all, it has a weird gun arc, so you might have to get used to it, but It cannot point the gun to the left as much as it could point the gun to the right. So it's like the artillery, the AMX-13F3, but alright. It has no gun depression, which sucks. Almost no gun elevation, which also sucks. 14 degrees is kind of bad, but alright, it's not that bad. But it's still not that good. Gun doesn't penetrate that well. 215 millimeters at tier 8 is not that good of a penetration for a tank destroyer. It's good for a heavy, it's okay for a heavy tank. It's not that good for a tank destroyer. Accuracy is not that good. Aim time is also not that good. Engine power is also not good. 520 horsepower in comparison to 700 horsepower on the ISU-152. So this thing sloshes around in mud and is generally slow. It only has 34 kilometers per hour top speed, which is way slower than the 48 kilometers or 46 kilometers per hour top speed, one of the which, but on the ISU-152. So this thing is slow. Yeah, the gun arc is also bad. So I think the only thing that's common between the ISU-152 and the ISU-130 is the hull armor, as well as the camera rating, but it has a crappy radio as well for the 130. So you actually have to play this thing in direct fire or close to the targets. So that's gotta suck. Ugh. So yeah, I don't know if this thing is actually a gift or a curse to the wargaming moderators or volunteers that are getting this thing, but the normal public would not be able to get this thing normally. So yeah, it's not that good of a tank destroyer. So don't be jelly. You should not be jelly of this thing. It's not that good. You can actually park an ELC or Object 416 in front of this thing, and the 1 degrees of gun depression makes that this tank will not be able to hit you if you're parked right in front of it. That's how bad it is. It's like when I was playing my Waffen trigger at E100 and there was an Object 140 parked right next to me. I cannot point the gun down to hit him. I can only shoot at the top of his turret. At the barely edge on the top of his turret. That's how bad of a gun depression it is. So yeah, very bad gun depression. But thank you guys for watching this video, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Now comment below on what you think about the ISU-130. In my opinion, don't be jelly. It's not that good of a tank destroyer. But comment below what you think, as well as rate this video. That helps me out a lot. Now subscribe to my channel for more of these leak videos, as well as tank reviews and other stuff I do for World of Tanks, like mod videos and whatnot. But hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.